Good morning. My name is Kurt Bell. Whoops. Get the key in the ignition here. Here we start the car up. Right. Oh, welcome to Freeway Bible Study. This is my narration of my daily meditations on the Bible, my daily study of the Bible. This is something I have been doing since the start of Genesis, since Genesis 1, and I'm up to Genesis 22 today. And as I finish each chapter, I make a summary like I'm doing today. Oh, by the way, I need to point out that I am a non-believer. I'm an atheist. I don't believe the supernatural bits about the Bible, or described in the Bible, or that people attribute to the Bible. But I'm very interested in its history and the stories that are within, and I'm also very interested in the claims that people make about the supernatural bits, even though I don't think any of them are true. And this is becoming, my conviction is growing as I proceed. My study of the Bible is only firming up my doubts. Rather having the opposite effect, I would imagine. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about Exodus 22, which is the first chapter for me to discuss openly like this, since I completed my book, Volume 1, Freeway Bible Study, or Freeway Bible Study Volume 1, which is Genesis to Exodus 21. It's a large book, over 400 pages, but it's all of my commentary about what I learned from reading from Genesis to Exodus 21, and I decided, why stop at Exodus 21? Why don't go all the way through to the Exodus? I stopped there because Exodus 21 was such a significant chapter to me in terms of solidifying not my doubt about the Bible, but my conviction, that my growing suspicion as I proceeded, that not only am I dealing with a story that simply proposes things that are not true, namely that God exists, but also that we're dealing with an antiquated morality that can't withstand modern scrutiny. That we have basically outgrown the morality as proposed and advocated in the Old Testament. And in Exodus 21, where we see God's preliminary prescriptions and rules and regulations regarding slaves, this is especially the case. So I decided to stop there, because that's basically where I reached the point where I said, this is the end of the study. I don't need to study any further. I can move on in life and not study the rest of it. I know now that the Bible is not only untrue, but immoral. So Exodus 21, the end of Exodus 21 is where I made the transition personally from being what would be called an agnostic atheist, someone who doesn't have any knowledge that God does not exist and has neither believed that God exists. I've transformed into really what is a Gnostic atheist. I no longer believe that. I'm going to switch over. I don't believe. Not only do I not believe that God exists, but I have good reason to believe that, and I'm laying out that case. It's a 5-point case at the opening section of my new book, Freeway Bible Study Volume 2, which will begin with Exodus 22. So let's talk about it. I spent a lot of time on this chapter, a chapter that I did not think I would spend very much time on, because I really thought that as Exodus 21 was done after the 10 Commandments were done in Exodus 20, that there wasn't much to say, that it would all be just, prescriptions about altar sacrifices and marriage and how to regulate the civil justice, what to do with thieves and stuff like that. And I thought it would be all, not boring, but mundane. How wrong I was. I didn't total it up, but I think I spent well over a month on Exodus 22. I may have spent more time on Exodus 22 than I actually did on Exodus 21, which is hard to believe, because Exodus 21 was a whopper. Oh, I can't get on there. I gotta go around here. Gosh darn it. Making all kinds of mistakes. No, never mind that I'm a driving instructor. You're not seeing this. Cutting across the double yellow line. Hopefully the device will catch my motorcycle. Some of these sensors don't pick up bikes, and you end up sitting at these lights forever. But I have to get on the right one, because I'm going to take the slow route over the mountains so that I can go to a slower speed and talk. So let's do this. Exodus 22. This chapter deals with three things. It's basically rules and regulations regarding thieves. What would you call it? What do you call it when you sweep out of wedlock? What is that called? Out of wedlock? What do you call it? Premarital sex. That's right. Thieves, premarital sex, and what's that last bit? Can't remember. So I think it's more about cattle. A lot of stuff about cattle in here. See, this light's never going to turn. So let's just do it, and we'll see if it turns. If not, then I'll find my way around another way. The first bit opens, chapter 22 opens with a description of what to do with a thief who has been caught. There we go. A thief who has stolen a sheep or an ox. Now, of course, we're dealing with a lot of sheep and ox and stuff like that because that was the stuff that made you wealthy and valuable and rich at the time, right? So it's contextual to that time. But still more evidence, that this is just this piece is relevant mainly to the time in which it was written. But what to do with a thief who has stolen either a sheep or a cattle, or sheep or an ox? And the word ox and cattle seem to be used rather interchangeably. Who has been caught red-handed still has the ox or the cattle, or the sheep or the cattle or the ox with him, probably a him. What to do with such a person? In the Bible, Exodus 22, let's slow our speed down. I'm taking this route so that I can drive slower and it'll reduce the wind noise. It tells us that the thief is to return the stolen goods plus one. So not invite him to dinner, but not that kind of plus one. But let's say I steal from you. I steal one of your one sheep from you, and I get caught, and I've still got the sheep. I give that sheep back and get you another one just like it. Or an oxen, same thing. But a little later, it says, what if the... no, I'm getting it backwards. That's the part that's a little bit later. It opens with, what if the thief steals such an animal, but somehow disposes of them, either slaughters them or sells them or whatever, and then is caught? Well, if that's the case, then there's it's different. If they've still got it, then they give it back plus one. But if they've gotten rid of it somehow, then they have to return. If it's a goat or a sheep, maybe it's a sheep, 4 sheep for the one that is lost. If it's a ox or a cow, 5 to 1. So if you steal your ox and I'm caught with it, I give you that back and I get another one like it for you. If I steal your ox and I sell it and I'm caught and somehow they can prove it, then I need to give you 5 oxes. I could have it backwards with regard to the sheep and the ox and the 5 and the 4. For some reason, one of those is less. You're only 4 versus 5. Very interesting. Exodus 22 then goes on to describe what to do if there should be any punishment if a thief breaks into a house and is caught and killed by the master. So let's say I break into your house and it's dark outside and you find me within and you kill me. If that's the case, then you get off scot-free. No blood will be spilt for you. And the way that it's worded kind of makes me think it's kind of like the vengeance blood. Like, if you kill me, and then my brother's going to come avenge my death because of that. You've got this, Hatfields and McCoy feud going on, right? The whole eye for an eye thing. But if that happens then, and it's dark, then you are in your rights to kill me. And if you read the rabbinical commentary, it goes on to say that anybody, it makes an assumption. The assumption is that anyone that is breaking in after dark has probably got on his mind murder, and probably got murder on the mind, and so it's self-defense. However, If the sun has risen, so it's light out, and you catch the person inside the house and you kill them, then you're liable. Blood will be shed. It doesn't really specify what that means, but I think what that means is that, you know, you're guilty of murder. Maybe the judges will find you guilty of murder, or maybe my brother will come and get you for killing me after the sun was up. A very particular and peculiar distinction between the two. Then we get two rules about lending or hiring cattle. Oh, no. Before that, we have to deal with the fire in the field. So if we have a field full of corn, and the word corn, of course, is a curious word. You see, you keep running into the word corn over and over in the Old Testament, which is funny because corn is a North American, you know, it came from the New World, and it wasn't until like the 15th century or so, or maybe it was that I think that the North American Native Americans introduced Western explorers to maize or corn. So the fact that the Bible refers to corn way back in Egypt is an interesting thing. But I think what they mean by that is grains in general. So if you have a field of corn, of grains, or whatever it is, and it's growing, and someone can, oh my gosh, it's cold right here. Woo! See, the cold air comes down these canyons like a river. Ooh, man. So if there's a field of corn and someone kindles a fire somewhere and it catches in the thorn brush, it specifically says the thorn brush, and spreads to the field, then the person who kindled the fire is liable to make amends or to make recompense, to provide recompense to the person whose grain was damaged. And this includes not just grain in the field, but if it's standing corn as well. And the person that kindled the fire must do so from the very best of his own fields. That's a true statement. The next true statement is about if you lend someone your animal and it dies. If you lend someone your animal, you know, your sheep or your goat or your ox or your horse or your cow. It doesn't say anything about horses. If you lend it and it is hurt or killed, then you're responsible to give that back, you know, to make up for the loss to the person who lent it to you, but only if the lender is not present. If the lender is with you and something bad happens to the animal, then you're not guilty, because ostensibly the lender is still executing some control by the virtue of the fact that he's standing there. And of course this is all it assumes males are involved in all this stuff. Women are back at the ranch, I guess. Now, if you hire some cattle out for that purpose and it's injured, then even if the lender is not there, you're still not responsible to make amends, because it was basically hired out. It's kind of like there's some insurance that comes with the deal. So the person that does the hiring is also assuming the risk of loss. Now, if there's more, and I'm kind of mixing this up, it might have been a little earlier. It's amazing how I can get this mixed up after reading it every single morning for over a month, including just an hour ago. If there's a dispute, so two men have a dispute about a particular item, like for example, if something goes missing and it shows up in your hands or something, well, that's clear cut. But let's say, for example, you lend me something and I have it at my house, or I'm holding it for you at my house, and a thief breaks in. I'm keeping it safe for you, and the thief breaks in and steals it, and it's not found. You know, well, what really happened to it? Did a thief really break in, or did I, the person that was holding it for you, dispose of it in some way to my own advantage? Well, the way to handle that is you take the case before the judges, and whoever will swear an oath before the Lord that his story is true, he is the one who will be believed. So the idea is, and it says so very clearly in the rabbinical commentary, that the idea is that, you know, if you lie to the God, you're going to suffer far greater punishment than whatever the judges, the Sanhedrin, might level upon you. So, whoever, if you swear an oath and you're lying, well, then you're going to get your just deserts. But if you swear an oath, and you're probably not going to lie because you really believe that this is going to happen. So this system, of course, will only work if all parties are believers and are, you know, tend to accept that God exists and that he will exert some wrath upon you for lying. So that's one way to settle it. There's also cases where the judges can kind of decide. I can't quite remember where that is, where the judges decide. Oh, that's if the animal is torn in the field. The judges are going to decide that case. Oh, that's the very last one, though. So somehow, amidst all this, all these little rules here about what to do with someone who steals a sheep or a goat, or if you kill them after dark, or after the sun comes up, or what to do if someone kindles a fire and it burns the field and, you know, burns some standing corn, and how much corn you're supposed to give them back. Right in the middle of all of that is thrown in this verse that basically is two verses that are kind of like three verses that are kind of out of nowhere, right in a row. The first one is thou shalt not suffer a witch to no. Before that it says, if a man entice a maid and sleeps with her, then he is to make her his wife, and that means that he has to give a dowry to her father. So you know, watch out sleeping with the girls. That's the premarital sex part, right? Because she's gonna become your wife. Question, I wonder if she's not a maid. What if she's not a virgin? It says maid in the King James Version, and it says virgin in the New International Edition. So I wonder if she's not a virgin, if that still holds. But of course the idea is that by having sex with her, you have basically compromised her value as a bride, and the amount of bride price her father would be able to get. So the law is that the man that sleeps with the virgin, that deflowers her, he is to give that full bride price. That's, you know, it's kind of like if you kill an animal, you're going to give him the value of that animal. If you take a girl's virginity, you have to owe her father the value of that virginity, so to speak, to make her his wife. Now, even get this, even if the father says, no way, Jose, I don't like this guy, this is not the match I want, you know, I'm not going to allow her to marry him, the man still has to pay him the full bride price, which seems fair, I guess. I don't know. All this stuff is kind of mixed up, you know. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that this is all just mixed up. I don't like the idea of that you know, girls have some property value to the father that has to be compensated in this way. And it's interesting, and that she's soiled and ruined of value by virtue of the fact that she had sex. Interesting. So right after that one comes another one that basically says, you shall not suffer a witch to live. And that's witch in the King James Edition, and sorcerer, I think it says, in the New International Edition. Now what's interesting is that someone pointed out to me when I was studying this section that this might be a translation, and that the real word I think they meant to say, was it a forger? I can't quite remember now. Anyway, it was a different type of offense. I think it was like forgery or something like that. What was it? It wasn't witchcraft. There's another type of offense that was the one that was guilty, that needed to be died, and I can't remember it. I don't know if it was forgery, but it was something like that. It'll be in my book. Plug for the new book. The commentary. I made like 3 days worth of commentary, 2 or 3 days worth of commentary on that one alone. But sadly, of course, this one verse is the one that has led to the death of so many girls and women, including in the Salem witch trials, and maybe men too. Salem witch trials, and of course in Africa currently, the killing of children by Christian sects that identify the children as being witches, and ascribe these verses to justify killing them. That's going on now. The last one there of the three is that anyone who has sex with an animal must be destroyed. Now, the wording is very careful, destroyed. Now, when I study the Bible, I study it first in the King James edition. I read that, then I read it in the New International Edition, and then I read it through my Torah at Chabad.org, which has rabbinical commentary, namely from Rabbi Rashi, who was a famous, I believe he was a 4th century French Jewish scholar who wrote extensively about the Torah, and his comments are considered rather authoritative in terms of understanding. And he mentions that the word destroy is not to be taken lightly. This means we are to utterly wipe from the earth. So it's not enough to kill the person guilty of bestiality, but we must also utterly remove them from the earth. And one example that he cited, I believe, was through burning. So for altar sacrifices, if you burn a sacrifice completely down to ashes, you have utterly destroyed it. I think that's the intended consequence for those who get a little too friendly with the wildlife. From there, it goes on back into more of the cattle and the sheep and the stuff, and I can't quite remember. Wait, hold on. Oh no, there's a couple of bits there about first fruits. So God tells the Jewish people to not delay or not hesitate to give Him their first fruit of their vineyard and of their fields, and of course of their cattle. Right. So. And he gives them a specific number of days, so and of his humans too. So I think it's if you have an animal. Let's go in reverse order. First, he talks about the first fruits of your vats and your vineyards, right? So your wines and your fields and the like. And he says right away you're supposed to just give that. I think you just give that as soon as it's ready. So if you're making wine, you give the first offering of the wine to God, and likewise when you do your harvest. The Japanese, when I lived in Japan, they did something similar to that. It's similar offerings to the gods of their Shinto pantheon. But then it goes on to say, don't forget about your sons. And it says, you are to give your firstborn sons unto me. And then the rabbinical commentary says, after 30 days. I initially mistook this to mean that you were supposed to give the sons into the priesthood. But I read further, did a little further studying, and I found out that meant, no, that doesn't mean that. That means you're supposed to give 5 shekels of silver to the priest 30 days after the son is born. And I did the math, and it turns out 5 shekels is worth in contemporary money about $50. So you have your first son is born, mazel tov, and you're gonna have all the good stuff. I think 8 days later you're gonna chop the end of the weenie, and then you're gonna excuse my weird language, but that's what it is. And then you're gonna collect up $50, and then 30 days after birth give that to the priest as an offering. Not to the priesthood. I think that confused me when I first thought that, because I thought only the Levites, the tribe of Levi, should be the priest, but I guess that's still the case. So then there's that, and then then we're almost at the end, and then and I'm sure I'm missing something. Then it talks about for newborn cattle. You need to give the newborn cattle. It's interesting how Rabbi Rashi really spends a lot of time talking about this. You're supposed to keep it with its mother, as they say in the King James edition, with its dam, D-A-M, which I guess means mom. It's mother, female. It's mother, for 7 days, and on the 8th day, give it to the Lord, which I guess it means it would be promptly sacrificed. Ritually killed and sacrificed. But the thing that Rashi goes on and on about is the meaning of the word. That meaning doesn't mean on the 8th day, but after the 8th day. That from that day forward you can give it. He doesn't say if there's an outward limit how long you have to keep it. But I mean, what's the use of keeping it, right? I mean, if you keep it 10 days, that means you had to. You had to feed the mother an extra 2 days to supply the milk for the calf or the baby sheep or whatever they're called. So it's probably good to just give it right away. And then the very, very last bit here, and this has got a real doozy at the end. What is going on over there? What is that? The very last bit. What is that? Oh, it's a grater. The very last bit is a piece that says what to do if you have an animal, and this is speaking specifically to a kosher animal, of course, because, well, of course it's got to be kosher, because the Jewish people aren't going to eat anything that isn't kosher. Or are they Jews? Yeah, I guess they're Jews at this point, because this is post-Moses. No, there were Moses is still around, but post you know, Exodus out of Egypt. I think that's when they become the Jews. Although maybe not. Maybe that's when they return from. Maybe they become Jews after they return from exile in Babylon. I don't know. Anyway, so the idea: if you have a kosher animal, you can eat it. Whoa, geez, Louise, good. Gosh, what are these people doing? Stay in your own darn lane, you. May the curse of God be upon. Can I do that? I don't think so. I won't listen. There's just the curse of God is upon me for my blasphemy and not believing. So never mind. Carry on. So the idea is that you have a kosher animal. It's out in the field, maybe. It's something that's okay to slaughter and eat. But a wild animal, a lion or wolves or whatever it is, comes. Oh, geez, Louise, I can't. How can I forget that? But before I say that, I really learned an interesting thing. It turns out that there's certain types of animals that. What are you supposed to do? I can't remember, but there's a list in here somewhere. I learned a list of animals that are like the fierce animals and the animals that are not so fierce. And there's some prescription about what you can do, like lions and snakes and the big ones and bears. You know, yeah. Basically, I think it meant something like you don't worry about those. I mean, that's just God's. That's an act of God if something happens to them. But if it's something else, oh, how did I forget about the usury? That was in here too. Oh my gosh, I knew I was going to forget something, but I didn't. I remembered. And then there's lesser animals like foxes and things like that you can shush away. And there's some rule in here. It's in the rabbinical stuff again, like, you know, the comments of the rabbis that says something about what you're supposed to do about the type of animal that attacks your animals. And so, hold on, let me back up a little bit, then I'll finish this thought. I almost forgot about the usury. Oh my gosh, a very interesting, maybe 3 or 4 verses that talk about if you loan money. So if you have someone that's, oh my gosh, and how can I forgot about 2 big things. Now I remembered them. Let's back it up 2. I've got 3 things to talk about. I'm sorry. The first one that I almost forgot about was that you shall not, and this is just after the thing about the bestiality, if you have a, excuse me, I got an itch. If you are not, oh, this is so topical too. You are not to in any way torment it, I'm not using the right words, distress or make problems for widows or orphans. God's really serious about this. Widows and orphans are He's watching over them. And if we do anything to distress or cause harm to widows or orphans, God has a very specific response to that. And if they cry out to Him, that's the key. The widows and orphans have to cry out to God. He will hear. Now sit up straight and listen, because this is important, especially you, America, with what we're doing to some of those little kiddos that are coming from across our southern border. If they cry out to us, God says He will kill us with the sword. But it's more than that. Rabbis tell us not only will He kill us with the sword, but He will do so in such a way that our bodies will not be found. Specifically, He's talking to menfolk now. Your body will not be discovered. The result of then is that you, since your body's not discovered, if you're the head of a household and you disappear, we can't resolve your fate. The judges can't make a judgment that, yeah, you are dead, and that what that means is that your wife will not be free to remarry, because the question is open. If she's still married, are you still alive? You know, that would be big. That would be you know, what do you call it? Is that bigamy when you marry more than one, something like that? And you can't have that. So she becomes a widow. Ooh, I mean, I gotta confess, I was pretty impressed. Now, this isn't in the Bible. This is the rabbis thinking this up, so they had a long time to think this stuff up. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't cough right into the mic. I usually train myself to open the helmet, but that's pretty insidious. I mean, I was impressed. This is one of those few moments in the Bible study that I actually had to sit back for a moment and go, man, that's heavy. I mean, you know, maybe this God guy is real. I mean, that's a pretty clever way to get back at him, right? I mean, you treat a widow bad, they're going to kill you and make your wife into a widow, and kill you in such ways to make your wife into a widow. But it gets better. It gets worse. Not only will your wife become a widow by virtue of the fact that your body isn't found, but guess what happens to your kids? They become orphans. So mistreat a widow or an orphan, and your wife and children will become widows and orphans. Wow, that's taken the eye for the eye and the tooth for the tooth thing to the max. I really did. I had to think about that for a whole morning while I was riding into work. I thought I was impressed. You know, if God is all about justice, I guess that's a form of justice. I mean, it's pretty tough justice, but there you go. As they say, very old book justice. Or maybe nobody says that. So the next piece was about the, so that one, hold on, was that it? It was about the widow and the foreigner. Oh, yeah. Oh, and there's another piece, a piece to that, which is, that's the widow and the orphan, also about the foreigner. God says, do not mistreat the foreigner, for you were once a foreigner in Egypt. Another important thing for us to keep an eye on in contemporary America. You were once a foreigner in Egypt, so watch out mistreating those widows of those orphans and those foreigners. Unless you want to make the foreigner a slave, well, that's okay. Or genocide them, that'll come later. Okay, well, we already did that, didn't we? Already kill all the Amalekites back there at the well at the rock? I think so. Where Moses hit his staff his metal staff against the rock and made all the waters come out, and then they killed all the Amalekites. They're foreigners too. So is that mistreating them? I don't know. I guess if God tells you to perform genocide, then that's not mistreatment. So there I covered that. And I'll get a last one, two more. Usury, which is, you know, a fancy word for you know, lending money. And usury is the word that is used in the King James edition, and I think it's borrowing is said in the New International Edition. And basically the rule works like this: if you have somebody that's poor, and he's a Jew, then you can lend to him, and you will not charge him interest. But if you have somebody who's poor and he's a Gentile, you know, non-Jewish, you can lend to him, but you can indeed charge interest. If you lend somebody to, I think in this case to anybody, and they're poor and they're having trouble paying back, you're not to trouble them. You're not to pester them. You're not to, and it actually says the word is embarrass. You shall not embarrass them in any way. Furthermore, there's a set of some guidelines about who to lend to and who to lend to. For example, three rules or three guidelines. The first is this: if you have money to lend and you have the option of lending to a Jew or a Gentile, I'm assuming you're a Jew, then of course the book was written for the Jews, then lend to the Jew. So the Jew over the Gentile if you have the money to lend. If you have money to lend and you have someone that's rich or poor, well, first of all, why does somebody that's rich want to borrow any money? Don't know. Well, look at our current president. I guess the king of debt, right? Apparently a billionaire. So I guess we do have cases where the rich borrow money. They leverage it as capital, right? So if you have money to lend and you have somebody that's poor and somebody that's rich, you lend to the poor. And the last one, if you have somebody to lend and you have the option to lend to a neighbor or a foreigner, you lend to the neighbor. So with regard to the Jews in particular, if you have money to lend to the Jew, lend to the poor, and lend to the neighbor. And in those cases, of course, you would be lending without interest, and if they can't pay it back, well, People don't look. And if they can't pay it back, then you're not to give them a hard time. And guess what? If they really can't pay it back, I think you're not even supposed to bring it up. I think you're supposed to consider it a loss. And I think anyway, it's going to be all debts are forgiven in 7 years. So and then of course the Jubilee. I think it works that way as interesting. So I think we've covered just about everything except last thing. I'll get back to it. I was talking about the animal, your kosher animal in the field that gets killed by a wild animal, a lion or a bear or something like that. What to do? Well, the technical term is torn in the field. Well, if you lend somebody an animal and the animal is torn in the field, well, the question is, does the borrower owe a similar animal back to the person who lent them? It was attacked by a wild animal. And the thing is, the way you figure it out is that both parties go to the judges. They go before the Sanhedrin, and the person who had been holding the animal takes the torn remains into the court so that they can be examined. And if the judges determine that this was an act of God indeed, then there's no payment is necessary. But the animal, the torn animal, must be thrown. This is a quote: "thrown to the dogs." That's what the meaning is. The thrown to the dogs. Now that's interesting. Now, what does that say then? If someone borrows, what if for acts of God? Let's say, for example, if my house is destroyed by a earthquake or a hurricane or something like that, am I then also relieved of the debt to the creditor by virtue of the fact of the act of the God? I don't know. It seems to make sense. There's like a term that I learned it's like a scholarly term, like Val Kilmer or something like that. He's an actor. It's something like that. It's two words that describes how you can infer a bigger law from a smaller law. And I think we can infer that from this smaller law, that an act of God in the destruction of a cattle by killing by wild animal, we can also infer that an act of God relieves the person that has borrowed the animal on credit, relieves them from obligation to repay the debt. Likewise, I think we should be relieved of our mortgage if our car loan if a tree falls on the car. Doesn't that make sense? I think so. So, but here's the doozy. Woohoo, man! Here's a whopper. So the very last verse, that's verse 30. So of Exodus 22. In verse 30, in the rabbinical commentary, Rabbi Rashi makes a very interesting distinction. He says, you must, regarding the throwing to the dogs, the throwing of the meat to the spoiled meat, the kosher meat that has been just soiled by the claws of a beast. You can either throw it. You have a couple of options. You can either throw it to the dogs, and then Rabbi Rashi goes on to say that throwing to the dogs is basically equivalent to, get this, giving the meat or even selling it to a Gentile. I was kind of astonished, and when I shared this online, a Jewish friend actually asked for a quote about, can you provide a quote, Kurt, about the actual comparison of the Gentile to the dogs? And there it was. It really is. Now, I'm not upset about that. I don't mind being compared to a dog. I am a Gentile, but if you actually, there's some Stoic philosophers that would have considered that a compliment. Who was it? Epictetus? No, Diogenes. Diogenes the dog, who actually admired the ethics of dogs. So anyway, I wouldn't mind that. Well, there's a ladder at the side of the road. That's not good. Ooh. Anyway, as a motorcyclist, any obstacle on the road is a scary thing. So anyway, that's an interesting way to end the chapter. Exodus 22 deals with a lot of little laws, and I really enjoyed it. I spent a lot of time on it, really studied it deep. I really had a good time. I can't wait. This is the end of Exodus 22. I get to move on now to Exodus 23. At the rate I'm going, I'm never going to see, the sun's never going to rise on the New Testament for me in terms of studying the Bible. I'll never get there because I'll be dead long. I don't even know if I'll make it. I don't even make it past the book of Joseph before I'm dead at this rate. But that's okay, because I'd studied the New Testament before, that's what led me. It was studying the New Testament that led me to become a non-believer in the first place. So it's probably fine anyway. Okay, well, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you driving with me for a little bit. And remember, be safe but not too safe. Take care. Bye-bye.